Hi SILEM stars, you're welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to make this lovely bustier basque waistline dress with rectangular flare and gathers. Okay, so if you want to see how we make this dress, definitely keep on watching. So I've already gone ahead to make the bustier part of this dress. This is an armhole princess dart bustier. So I'm going to link those tutorials in the pinned comment as well as in the description box down below. But this is what it looks like. Very neat. Okay, it's sleeveless. Now moving on to the basque part of this dress, we're going to be drafting the pattern together. The first thing I did was to mark my zipper allowance, which is 1.5 inches, and then I'm going to mark the baseline. Now I'm drafting the back piece, however I'm going to use the same pattern for the front piece as well. Now from the baseline, which is also the waistline, I'm going to mark the hip line, which is 9 inches, and I'm just going to extend that line and label it. Now from that hip line, which is 9 inches, I'm coming down by 5 inches, okay, which is how deep the basque is going to be. If you want yours to be higher than this, you can go up a bit. Now on the waist, I'm dividing the waist circumference by 4, marking that. Then I'm adding 1 inch for dart because I'm going to be putting a dart at the back piece. Then I'm adding my normal 1.5 inches sewing allowance. On the hip line, I'm dividing the hip circumference by 4. I'm marking that and I'm adding the 1.5 inches allowance. Now make sure you're taking these measurements from the zipper allowance and not from the edge of the paper. Now what I have on my hip line, including the allowance, I'm going to mark that same thing on the length. And then I'm going to go in by 1 inch just so that it has a bit more fitting. Then I'm going to connect all 3 points with a curve. Okay, now because I'm going to be using this pattern for my front as well, I'm going to take out the dart allowance, which is 1 inch, and then connect it back to the hip. Now from the waist, I'm going to come down by 1 inch because I want the basque to start very high, and then I'm just going to connect that to the length. Now, in order to remove any form of zipper bulging, I'm just taking out 0.75 inches from the waist and connecting that to the hip on the zipper allowance, okay? And then I'm just going ahead now to cut out everything. Now, when I want to draft for my back piece, I'm going to place it like this. But when I want to draft my front piece, I'm going to fold in the zipper allowance, and I'm also going to fold in that allowance as well. Okay, so that's how I'm going to place it on my fabric in order to cut it. So I'm using the same pattern to cut both the front piece and the back piece. Okay, so after cutting the pieces, this is what we have here. I cut them for both my fabric and my lining, and now I'm just indicating the wrong side of both the fabric and the lining. Now I'm placing the lining and the fabric right sides facing for the front, and I'm going to join them by the sides. For the back pieces, I'm going to do the same thing. I'll place the fabric and the lining right sides facing like this. I'm going to join the sides, okay? Join the sides, and then I'm going to turn them to the right side. This is what they look like on the right side. I also ironed it neatly. Now I'm placing the back pieces right sides facing, and then I'm just marking 1 inch from the edge. Okay, 1 inch from the edge. That's where I'm going to join the back pieces together. So just mark that 1 inch from the top all the way to the bottom. And then from that 1 inch mark, I'm going to mark 4 inches for my dart, and then the length of my dart is 5 inches. So that's where I'm going to add my dart. Okay, I'll mark that same thing on the other side as well. 1 inch from the edge, and then 4 inches from that 1 inch mark, and then the length of my dart is 5 inches. So I'm just going to put in my darts on both sides after joining the pieces together. Now after joining, this is what we have. I'll just open up the allowance there, iron it flat, also iron the darts flat as well, so everything is nice and neat. And once we're done with that, we can move on to our handkerchief skirt. Now to get the radius that you're going to cut your handkerchief flare, I'm just going to divide my waist by 6.28, and that gave me 4.7. Now if you're wondering how we got this 6.28, I'm going to explain. Okay, now this 6.28, if you remember, then in primary secondary school there's something called 2 pi r, which is the circumference of a circle. Okay, now to get the radius, using this 2 pi r formula. To get the radius, you have to do 2 pi, and as we know is pi as we know is 3.14. Okay, so 2 pi means 2 times 3.14, and if you multiply that, you're going to get 6.28. Now that is how we got this 6.28. But if you don't care for maths, don't worry about all of this. Just know that you have to divide your waist circumference by 6.28 to get the radius, and that radius is what is important. Okay, so for me it is 4.7. So don't worry about any other maths, just do this simple division. Now when it comes to cutting your handkerchief flare, you're going to fold your fabric lengthwise like so, and also fold it widthwise, just the way I did with my paper. And now you're going to mark that radius that you calculated. So while you mark it, keep moving your tape and keep marking that same radius until you have a curve like this. And then you want to measure your desired length for the skirt. Okay, so if you want your skirt to be 20 inches, just mark 20 inches and just draw a straight line and cut it out. Now if you were making a flare, you would have curved it at the bottom, but for a handkerchief flare like this, you don't need to curve it at the bottom. You just leave it straight, so it has that square hem. So this is what it's going to look like once you're done. So now that I've explained that with my paper, I'm going to do the same thing now with my fabric. So I folded my fabric lengthwise and widthwise, and then that 4.7, I decided to add a bit of allowance to that to make it 5 inches. So I just marked 5 inches all the way and drew that curve. The length of my skirt is 23 inches. So I just marked 23 inches on one side there and 23 inches on the other side. And then I just went ahead to cut out that curve. Okay, and I also cut out the length as well. Okay, so when you measure now, you see that I have 23 inches on this side, and when I move my fabric, you see that I also have 23 inches on the other side. So once I unfold it, can you see that we have our lovely handkerchief skirt looking very, very nice. Now if you're joining this directly to your waist and it's not a basque waist, you can just join it like this. Okay, but for me, my skirt has that basque waist. Okay, so I have to modify this. So what I'm doing is I'm placing the basque on top, then I'm just marking the outline of that V shape. Okay, now if you want your piece to fit perfectly into the basque, you have to cut ½ inch above that V shape that you marked. But for me, I'm cutting the exact V shape because I want to gather mine a bit. So it means my skirt is going to be a bit wider than that basque waist, and I'm okay with that because I'm going to be gathering that. So after that, I went ahead to just cut open the back. So where I have my zipper allowance for the back, I just cut that open, and then I cut the same thing on my fabric. Now because this is a handkerchief flare, I want a bit of the fabric to show, that's the Ankara fabric, to show at the bottom. Okay, just so that when the client moves, you know, a bit of the Ankara will show. So I'm just placing the Ankara about a few inches away from the hem, and then I'm going to sew it and then flip it, you know, flip it down and then sew it at the hem as well. So this is what you're going to have. The Ankara I used was 4 inches wide. Okay, and then now I place the lining on top of the fabric with the right sides facing each other like so. Okay, and then I'm going to pin them at the hem. Now adding the Ankara to your lining is optional. It's just something I prefer to do just for that extra style. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to join the lining and the fabric all the way around. So just join them all the way around, or around all the corners. Okay, and then after that, you're going to iron it neatly and then sew the top part by top stitching it. Okay, so sew the waist part by top stitching. So now when you look at the fabric, you can see a bit of the Ankara peeking through, which is what I was trying to achieve. All right, so this is what it looks like. Very, very neat, as you can see. So I went ahead to sew the top like I showed you earlier. Now for that gathers piece, the width of this fabric I have here is 8 inches. You can make yours wider if you want, but I don't want mine to be too wide. Now mine is 8 inches. I'm going to fold it lengthwise, and I'm going to sew right at the top. I'm going to sew gather stitches, okay, right at the top. The length of this was about 5 yards because I had to make it very long since I was going to make gathers. Now I'm just placing the basque, the skirt part of the basque, right sides facing with the blouse, and I'm just going to join them together, both for the front piece and for the back piece as well. For the back piece, I'm going to open up the zipper allowance a bit, align them at the zipper allowance, and then I'm just going to pin them. Pin the pieces right sides facing like so, and I'm going to join them with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now after joining them, I'm just going to place them right sides facing like this, and then I'm going to mark the actual body measurements of my clients. I mark the bust, and then I'm also marking the waist as well. I'm marking them now on both sides, and I'm going to connect both points with a straight line. Then I'm going to join the front piece and the back piece along that line. Now for the gathers piece, after sewing the loose stitch, I'm just gathering the piece. Although I started off with gathers, I actually changed my mind later on, and I decided to make pleats instead because the fabric is really thick and I felt like gathers would be too bulky. So whether you're doing gathers or pleats, simply place the piece on the handkerchief skirt and then just sew it at the waist. So this is what you're going to have once you're done sewing it. As you can see, I actually did tiny pleats instead of gathers. So just decide what you want to do, either pleats or gathers. Now I'm going ahead to mark the bask, so that V shape of the bask, I'm just marking that point, and I'm also marking the sides as well. Okay, so the sides of the piece, I'm also marking it. It's important that you mark it so that when you're joining it to your skirt, you know the part of the flare that goes to the different parts of the rest of the dress. So I'm going to explain what I'm talking about right now. So now when you're placing your handkerchief skirt, now starting from the back where you have the zipper allowance there, you're just going to pin that in place. Now the part that you marked as the side, it has to match with the side seam of your dress. Okay, so just match it up, because this handkerchief has the hem is, some parts are low, some parts are high when it comes to the hem. So you want to match it up very well so you don't make a mistake. Now that bask that you have on your handkerchief, make sure that it aligns with the bask of the rest of the dress. So just pin that in place, and then finally the other side that you marked should match up with the other side of the dress. So just make sure that everything aligns nicely. You also want to make sure that the final zipper allowance part matches as well. So just go ahead and sew it all the way. And this is the final look of the dress. I really love how it turned out. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.